Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. I have to do this first part, the first couple minutes again, because they hacked my phone and messed it up. But I want people to know that I'm not saying that people should attack civilians. They should. And I don't want people to misconstrue that. What I will be discussing is the domino effect of being outside the divine order. Again, what I call the domino effect of being outside the divine order. This video is extremely important. I'll prove definitively that I'm right and that the opposition view is not just wrong, they are way off and they are demonic. Okay, so what the domino effect of being outside the divine order shows us is that everyone who lives outside the divine order is guilty of everything that they have anything to do with. Because why are they here in the first place? Rebellion is the essence of all sin. And since they're cheating me out of my right to lead, they're not listening to my correction and instruction. If they shoot out with somebody and they hit an innocent person, that is also on them in reality. Not necessarily legally, and the laws hardly matter. They basically don't matter. God's law is what matters. And so when we look at this thing and we look at the scriptures on the screen, everyone who sins and keeps on sinning is of the devil. Now, what kind of a devil are you? Everyone who cheats me out of my right to lead is on the broad path to destruction. And I'm not somebody who's telling you this from some kind of American agenda or LGBT or conservative or left wing or right wing, okay, or black supremacist. I'm telling you this as the Son of God, as the top martial artist ever possible. And we'll get into why the phrase martial arts is a play on words for marital star, and how it refers to the sun as the symbol of the bridegroom later on in this video. Again, I had to redo this first part. It's actually longer than it otherwise would be, and I'm going to break this into several parts because of the situation here, and then I'm going to upload it again all in one part if I remember. So keep in mind, I've proven that I'm the Messiah. See my Proof I'm Christ playlist, and consider the difference between being on the broad path to destruction and the narrow path through me to life. You need to obey God through me to be on the narrow path to life. Read Matthew 7 many times, take notes. People who are on the narrow path to life are obeying God through me, right? The way, the truth, and the life. The throne is established in justice. The divine throne, not some worldly throne like in England or Saudi Arabia, what have you. So, if you're part of a group that is emerging with more worldly power, and you're outside the divine order, then you're more of a devil than a group that has less worldly power. Right? The difference between the devil and average demons in hell has to do with power that's exerted and potential power, what have you. So the main devils, or the main people in the spirit of the devil, the people channeling the devil himself, while other people are just channeling demons in that sense, are people and groups that are exerting more power. And if you are a citizen of that nation, the right thing to do is to explain that to them, not to beat around the bush. I've seen preachers say that the government is satanic before, and of course I'm the Messiah, not just a preacher. And the government basically leaves them alone, but they don't leave me alone, because those guys are part of the problem, not part of the solution. Pretty straightforward. So anyone who sins is of the devil. Anyone who keeps on sinning is of the devil. It's not a sin when you obey God through me and you accept my correction and instruction. It's just a mistake. That's the difference there. And groups like Israel and America and powerful nations in Europe, they're the main demons and / the devil himself on this planet, because they're exerting more worldly power while being outside the divine order. Now let's see what the prophet Ezekiel has to say about it. So in Ezekiel chapter 1, it talks about the 4 living creatures that connect to the idea of a cherubim, And there's fire, there's metal that symbolizes the sword, there's wheels that symbolize the spirit of a chariot, a divine chariot charge, for example, wagons, a divine movement, what have you. We get to Ezekiel chapter 2, verse 3. It talks about how the Jews were in rebellion from at least 1200 BC all the way up to the time of the prophet Ezekiel, hundreds of years. We see in chapter 5, it says that God is making the Jews an object of ruin and reproach. Those who don't obey God through me, a ruin and a reproach, right? A byword, the laughingstock. He's ruining them. In Ezekiel chapter 6, verses 3 through 7, it says that people, especially the Jews, are going to be slayed, spiritually speaking, in front of the idols that they worship. Okay, bear with me now. I'll go over this again in a way that makes it very simple here. In Ezekiel chapter 11, verse 21, it says that their idolatry is brought down on their own heads. That what they're doing when they worship idols is going to be brought down on their heads. For example, if you're an idolater and you're a controlled opposition liberal Jew who's a Luciferian, who's a satanic feminist, who is even a liberal Christian Jew or a liberal rabbi, and you're not obeying God through me, your idolatry is going to be brought down on your own head. Now, what do you benefit from? Do you benefit from Jewish privilege? Yes. Have you separated yourself from Jewish guilt? No. And Jewish guilt is the guilt of any Jew outside the divine order. Gentile guilt is the guilt of any Gentile outside the divine order. Fair enough? Not racist? Okay. So it leads us to chapter 14, verses 7 through 11. This chapter is extremely key. I urge you to write down Ezekiel 14, print it out, put it on your wall, and highlight verses 7 through 11. This is extremely important here. Without it, you're not going to have the same understanding of the Bible and the Old Testament, or the Old Testament especially. In Ezekiel chapter 14, it says that God leads the Jews astray using their idols, using their false leaders, using their community sentiment, their behaviors, their beliefs, using PSYOP units that are leading them astray, whose paths that they've committed to because they don't care about God enough to make sure that they're morally precise. Matthew 5, right? Be perfect because your heavenly Father is perfect. So it says he's leading them astray. Now, what's going on here? These idols are idols like Baal. They are demons. Okay, so Ezekiel chapter 16. Again, I'm piecing this together in a way that's consistent with God's wisdom, in a way that is not taken out of context. Ezekiel, like the other prophets, was told by God to speak to the Jews in riddles. We see that with Isaiah as well, and we see that they're using the same kind of pattern and language that the other prophets are using. So they're speaking to them to a large degree in a way that's figurative. But it's not as much of a riddle as you might think. So in Ezekiel chapter 16, we see in verses 27 and 35 through 44 that the Jews are given to their enemies for adultery, for their adultery, right? For their idolatry, which is also referred to as adultery. We'll see that in the next chapter in a second here. Now, it's not talking about them being taken physically per se. It's talking about the idols themselves and their spirits being the enemies of the Jewish people. Okay, in the story, what have you. I know there's a lot of controversy over who the Jewish people are, but let's just keep it simple here. So, what ends up happening is they start taking on the ways of the foreigners, which ruins them. Ezekiel talks about that pretty extensively in the book of Ezekiel. So it's saying that they're given to the enemies for their idolatry, and they become part of the enemy's spirits, regardless if they're in Israel or in America, in Africa, wherever they are. Okay? And that is the masses of them on the broad path, who are also persecuting the ones, if there is any ones, right? In a sense, I'm part Jewish in a sense, so on and so forth. They're persecuting the one or the ones on the narrow path. And no one is obeying God through me, so the simple matter is it's just me, right? I'm the only one walking in God's path is the simple answer. Now, you see that in Galatians 4, where it says the worldly Jews are persecuting the Jews who are right with God, the Jew or Jews. Okay. And we also see in the New Testament that Christ is a character in the story. He says, how can you who are evil say anything good? And he says, even though you're evil, you know how to give gifts to your children, and so on and so forth. He's calling people evil, including his disciples to some degree. So in Ezekiel chapter 17, verses 16 through 22, we see how it talks about Jerusalem used its beauty. It used the things that God taught it, right? The Jews, Jerusalem, the city, the people, the leaders, to kind of make themselves look good, and they refused to clean the inside of the cup and dish like it says they should do in Matthew 23 in the New Testament, but instead focused on the outside, on appearances instead of application and devotion and faithfulness and justice. So that blows up in their face, and their enemies, they start hating their enemies, and their enemies start punishing them, and vice versa. So these demons are punishing the demon in them of rebellion, these false idols, and vice versa. And that's what Revelation 20 is very much about. Now, in Ezekiel chapter 19, it's a lament over Israel's princes, and again it talks about how they're trapped with hooks by the nations, more specifically the idols of the nations, which led them astray. So again, real quickly here, in Ezekiel, let's just go over the idol part here. Ezekiel chapter 5, because of their idolatry, right? Verses 14 through end, they're made a ruin and reproach. Ezekiel chapter 6, verses 3 through 7, they're spiritually slain in front of their idols. In Ezekiel chapter 11, verse 21, their idolatry is said to be brought down on their own heads, right? So God is intending to punish them because of their idolatry. In Ezekiel chapter 14, the most important chapter in Ezekiel, arguably, verses 7 through 11, God makes it crystal clear that he's going to lead them astray through their idols, and he says it more than once. He overkills it. Ezekiel chapter 16, verses 27 and 35 through 44, they're given to their enemies because they keep going on the path of idolatry, which leads them to the evil spirits of their enemies governing them one way or another. And Ezekiel chapter 17, verses 16 through 22, Jerusalem used its beauty, the inner beauty that it cultivated, to attract evil people. And then they focused on their outer beauty, and it blew up in their faces, right? And they become abused by the idolaters and vice versa. In Ezekiel chapter 19, it's a lament over Israel's princes, as they're said to be trapped with hooks. Their leaders, their people, following their leaders, what have you. They're trapped with hooks and led astray by these evil principles, leaders, spirits, false idols, what have you. Ways, customs, behaviors, sentiments, emotions, and the principles of evil of these other nations and their idols. And we see that to this day. Even Israel was made by the Balfour Declaration, which involved Lord Rothschild and various Jews and Gentiles who were plotting to make the Jewish people a very Gentile-thinking group of people. Whether or not you believe that the Jews in Israel are the real Jews, what have you. So one way or another, Jew or Gentile, that is their path. So now when you worship idols, right? Let's say you worship Malbolgia, this demon that was depicted in the movie Spawn. They referred to him as a demon. He was a demon, right? Asmodeus is said to be a demon of lust. Beelzebub. If you worship one of these demons, that you become like that demon. And that you are like a demon. You're like a gate or a vessel for demons abusing people. So you're expressing that demon in the world. If you're expressing that demon in the world, whether or not you're slaughtering Palestinian children directly, whether or not you've ever served in the IDF, you are still part of the demon collection, right? Worship, right? And worship. We are ship. You're on board. You're part and parcel. You're complicit. You're helping them do it to varying degrees. And part of that demon ship, that demon collection, that demon formation are people, the masses of Jews who are controlled opposition, the masses of Jews who say they don't approve of the war. Whether they approve of the war or disapprove of the war, instead of coming and obeying God through me, they're conveying a demon. And they also benefit more from Gaza because part of the world that's being forged is a world of white, Jewish, and LGBT supremacy. And then when they reproduce, it overkills. You see what I'm saying? They're reproducing Jews who are outside the divine order, who they're raising to be outside the divine order. And after my flesh dies, there will be no one to lead them no matter what. The 7 seals, they're sealed out of heaven. We see in Zechariah, wickedness, right? A house is being built for the Babylonian people, who's symbolized by wickedness in the basket. And there's a lead cover put over it. It's sealed in. That's figurative for the planet, right? Isaiah 24, the earth sinks never to rise again. Isaiah 34, all the nations are destroyed for this idolatry because they're channeling demons of rebellion. Be it some martial art action hero in popular culture, be it, MAGA fans, woke, Antifa, Proud Boys, be it the average American cowboy or skater. They're all identifying as those things instead of living universal pinpoint and moral precision like I am, and first and foremost being in the divine order, and thus authentically and sincerely and in a genuine manner identifying as a person of God with the mark of God on their forehead instead of the mark of the beast, which also goes back to Ezekiel, which goes back to the 665 days and the six men or angels with the weapons of God to destroy those who do not have the mark of God. That's what Revelation is referring to. The mark of God versus the Babylonian system and its satanic mark of the devil. And Babylon had these idols that went throughout the world, especially through Greece and Rome, right? Jupiter, the main deity of Rome, was Baal's equivalent. And it's, the idolaters weren't just people who went to the cult of Jupiter. They're people who went into the Roman culture, right? Cult and culture. The extension of the cult was the culture. And we see in the Bible it talks about the sacred inner chamber, the outer chamber and the inner chamber, the outer temple and the inner temple. So you're part of the battleship of the devil when you're not obeying God through me. You're part of the outer or inner temple of the devil when you're not obeying God through me. You're part of the formation, the form, the life form. The word for and form are connected. And formula, formulae, which goes back to a very key proof here. Set in Egyptian mythology is Baal's Egyptian equivalent, and he's said to testify against himself. And we see in the phrase martial arts, when we scramble it, we get marital star. Above other things, you also get marital rats and all this stuff. You got to see the truth and the lie. What is the truth? The truth is that the sun is also considered a star by countless scientists. And we see in Psalm 19 that the sun is the symbol of the bridegroom. Okay? So when we're talking about martial arts and we're connecting it to the marital star, that is the sun, which symbolizes God and the bridegroom in Psalm 19. It also in Malachi, look up the phrase, the sun in righteousness. The sun in righteousness. Not someone misrepresenting the sun or worshiping the sun, but doing everything justice, instead of doing the wrong thing. And that includes putting God first and his divine order, right? A martial art order, right? Rank. Kuro Obi means black belt. And Obi in Igbo means King Heart Hut Essence Center Temple Core. But just like in Western culture, which king? The one who's acknowledged by the world at this point? No. The one who's established a throne in justice, the divine king, the divine heart, the divine center, the divine core, the life, the way, the truth, and the life. That divine sort of indigenous and potent, righteous martial art king, that's me. There's no other way it could be when you consider doing the situation justice. Again, Luke 12:57, why don't you judge for yourselves what is right? When you look at this, is it right for them to cover it up? To code it in their words and to occult it? Occult means hidden in plain view. Is that the right thing to do? Or is the right thing to do to explain these things to you so you can have informed consent and make a sound decision for yourselves and your families? So anyone who's trying to cover this up is trying to scatter anyone who otherwise would obey God through me. And whoever doesn't gather with me scatters. And to marshal, spelled differently, means to order and to arrange, to gather. So martial arts, the divine martial arts, the heavenly warrior defeats the beast of God. To gather God's children for God versus to be in a secret society and to suppress the truth, or to behave like you're in a secret society and to suppress the truth. That makes one the enemy of God, and that's a profound, profound disgrace. The light of the world versus the darkness. And in the Bible it says Satan tries to blind the minds of people so they don't see the glory of God. And the glory of God is martial, is monotheistic, Royal African Falcon martial arts. Ham begot Cush, Cush begot Nimrod. Nimrod was a mighty warrior before the Lord. And the proverbial saying that Jews would say to each other is, like Nimrod, a mighty warrior before the Lord. What is the Spirit of God? Like Nimrod, a mighty warrior spirit. Exodus 15:3, the Lord is a warrior, the Lord is his name. Isaiah 42:13, like the Lord marches out like a champion, a martial champion, connecting Psalm 18 to Psalm 19, etc. So when you look at this thing, we see that the Jewish people, with all their money and power as a group on the broad path, not any individual who might obey God through me, they are suppressing this. They have the money to expose it, and they chose to suppress it, which means they have violated the covenant with God in an irreversible and unforgivable way. They do not represent God. They represent the masses of Jews in the Bible who were channeling the demons of the false idols that they accepted into their hearts, into their souls, and into their minds. There is no other way to look at it. And in the name of God, I command you all to obey God through me, or accept that you and your offspring will cook, and your souls will cook in hell. When I say you and your offspring will cook, I mean your souls, not your flesh. I don't give a damn about your flesh. Your souls will cook in hell. Because what you have done is so profoundly evil, so profoundly unforgivable, and you've lied about God Almighty. Who could forgive that? Certainly not the Son of God. Thank you.